and welcome to this Getting Started with SharePoint tutorial series. And this is the video where we actually are setting up our development environment. This has been recorded in January 2020, and it's matching the SharePoint Framework 1.10 version. So if you are using a newer version of SharePoint Framework, please always go to our documentation and double check the latest guidance and latest assets related on what you should be installing and what is the process of getting started. There might be some small nuances and to match the right versions to avoid any complications within your environment. And especially with SharePoint Framework 1.10, you need to be careful that you're installing the right Node.js version. So as part of the SharePoint Framework 1.10 version, we are supporting Node.js version 10. We do not support the currently default LTS version, the long-term supported version, which is 12. So the supported version actually currently still at the time of SharePoint Framework 10 release, the Node.js is still active LTS version, but as part of the SharePoint Framework 11 release, we will be then moving to support Node.js 12 and so on. So we are slightly, so to say, you might say that we're slightly behind of the support for Node.js with SharePoint Framework, but this is always a classic timing challenge when we are releasing something as a new setup and a new version to make it match on the Node.js and other packages which the open source community is using. So please always go to the documentation side, make sure that you are actually installing the right versions. Like we're saying right now here, go and install Node.js LTS version 10. And if I click this one, it will be redirect me to the latest v10 setup. And like in the documentation, in the guidance we actually call out, you should be installing either the x64 or x86 version. And those links, by the way, are actually, those assets are directly linked here as well. So you can actually find, so if you're in Windows environment, you typically are installing the x64 version. I don't think there is that many people anymore using the x86 version of Windows. So let's actually click that one, and that's going to then download the right package to our computer, and we can actually open that when it's done. So it is scanning for viruses right now, but that's going to open up in a second. So like I said, recapping one more time, please make sure always checking the documentation so that you're using and installing the right versions which the SharePoint Framework is supporting as well. The Node.js installation is quite easy. So we basically just say next, accepting the license agreement, and moving forward. The installation path, the default path is fine for us, at least in this computer, and the default settings are completely fine. And that's it. And confirming the administrative permission, and there we go. The installation of the Node.js is now pretty much completed. So that's super fast basic setup, and we are good to go with following steps. Now, the next thing what we definitely want to install is also then our code editor. And obviously, you can use whatever code editor you prefer. It could be Visual Studio Code, Atom, WebStorm. All of these are fully supported. So in our case, we're going to use the Visual Studio Code. So let's actually install that one. Before we actually go there, let's confirm that the Node.js has been installed. Let's click Finish. So Visual Studio Code. Let's jump back in here and let's download the stable version for Windows. And it is an awesome tool, which is evolving really fast as well, because it's fully open source and a lot of people are contributing on the Visual Studio Code as well. So let's open up the setup. When the downloading has completed and accept the agreement, clicking next, I'm not gonna add the desktop icon. Personally, I really like these open with code settings in the Windows Explorer file context menu and the directory context menu. It's super useful stuff, which will increase your productivity. So you can actually spin up open with code in any folder and all of that. So super useful to actually have the default settings enabled. And clicking install, super fast, easy installation as well. Good. So now we have Visual Studio Code installed. We're not going to launch Visual Studio Code. You can obviously launch that as well and then install whatever extensions you prefer. We're not going to do that yet. We're going to actually do execute or install some other environmental variables before, or environmental setups before we do that. So let's actually start a PowerShell. You can use whatever command line prompt you want. In my case, I haven't installed anything on this clean Windows 10 computer, so I'm going to use the PowerShell as the command line tool. And from here, we can then double check what is our node version, which has been installed. So in this case, it's 10.8.1. And again, if you're watching this video slightly later, it might be a slightly different version which is getting installed, even though you would be using the 10 point version of Node.js. So there might be newer versions over there. And the other thing which we quite often actually ask if there's any issues you're running into, what is your NPM version? And in this case, it's 6.13.4. And again, it might be slightly different if you're watching the video or executing your setup later than I'm actually executing this video recording. But what we want to do here is that we want to install the needed setups globally, and that's the G switch here. So we're going to install Yeoman generator and Gallop globally to be available. And this Yeoman generator is basically our project template structure tooling, and Gallop is our task manager. So they are vital for the creation of the SharePoint Framework solutions. So if you come from the Windows background, it's basically Yeoman generator is the Visual Studio project templates and taking care of that, and Gallop is the MS Build engine, so the task engine behind of the scenes. Installing these basically means that it's the installer is connecting now to the internet and then downloading the dependencies and all of the structures related on the Yeoman generator and Gallop and getting those globally installed to the machine. Doesn't take too long, but let's actually speed up the video to make sure that we don't wait too much time at this step. And there we go. Now we have Yeoman generator and the Gallop task manager installed on this machine. So one more thing what we actually need to do is install then the SharePoint Framework Yeoman templates. And that one we can do also, or we will be using the npm installer to do that. So npm install-g and Microsoft/generator SharePoint is the command, and that's going to then install the Yeoman generator to the computer. So let's execute that one again and speed up the video, so making sure that everything is available. Good. So now the Yeoman generator has been installed. Everything has been installed. And like we mentioned in our documentation, the next step would be then to execute and trusting a self-signed developer certificate. And this is something which is needed, so you're able to serve from the HTTPS, so using SSL from your local host. But we cannot actually do that unless we have actually scaffolded a one SharePoint Framework solution. So let's actually do that. So let me go back on, let me go to a root of this computer, and let me create a demo folder, and I will go to that demo folder, and we at the same time we will be then testing that the installing and everything else is working properly. So let me clear that command line. So in here I'm going to do yo Microsoft.SharePoint, and that's going to then execute the Yeoman generator for SharePoint. So just making sure that everything is running properly. And here we go. It is actually saying you can't see that well, but it's welcome to the SharePoint client-side solution generator. The colors slightly depend again on what command line tool you're using. In this case, the PowerShell is not quite optimal, so it looks quite, you can't really see what's written over there. But what's your solution name? And let's call that demo. We're going to target SharePoint Online. We're going to use the current folder, so that's fine as well. We kind of allow that this settings doesn't really matter this much right now, because we're just making sure that everything is working properly. I'm going to target a web part. I want to have a web part solution. Hello world is fine. Hello world description is fine. No JavaScript framework. And that's going to start then the solution structure. So first of all, we created the basic structure, and then we'll start installing all of the dependencies as part of this solution. And again, this is going to take a while. So let's actually speed up the video until the solution structure creation is fully completed. Good. So the basic solution structure is now created on this demo folder, and then this particular execution is a one-time execution, but it has to be executed inside of a solution structure so that all of the settings and everything else are available. So you can do this as part of the first Hello World tutorial, or you can do this as part of this setting up the scene environment for your computer. So one-time execution per environment, so running the Trust Dev Cert, and that's basically asking you to then install developer certificate so you can serve from HTTPS and that address using, which is required when you're running the local workbench. And we will go through the local workbench and everything else in the following tutorials. So basically, you need to be an administrator of the computer and trust and that certificate. And there we go. Now we're good to go on actually starting to create solutions and serving them locally from the local host and testing them against SharePoint Online. But that's it for this particular video. Now, one thing maybe to just pinpoint, I'm going to start Visual Studio Code. In that environment, we can actually see that Visual Studio Code is running and up and running. Also, the exact version and structures and everything else slightly again depends on the time when you are watching the video. Also, in the Visual Studio Code, there's awesome set of extensions which you can actually install here. In this case, we have a debugger for Chrome already installed, but we can actually install many other extensions as well, which are available in the Visual Studio Code gallery. Again, depending on your preference, depending on your environment and what you want to do. There's also multiple different other tools like Fiddler and Postman and Commander and oh my gosh for Mac and Git source control tools, which you can install on your computer. So again, slightly depends on what is your preference and what you want to use for your setup. But the basic things and basic environment requirements or the minimal requirements have been now installed on this computer, and we can proceed with the Hello World tutorial 1 after this one.